recently had a chat to the co-founders of the Jupiter Drawing Room, Graham Warsop and Renee Silverstone, and got some insight on how it all started.
Renee, Graham, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us on Media and Money today. It's not every day that we get the two of you in the same place at the same time, so we appreciate that. Talk us through, it's been 21 years. It must have been quite a journey. There's too many awards to actually even mention. So take us through, how did it all start? How did the two of you get together and start this agency called Jupiter Drawing Room?
Well, shall I go first?
You go first.
I was working at a bigger agency, a large South African agency, and I was getting a little bit frustrated because they had review boards, so all the work that I was thinking should be going through wasn't going through. And then there was the opportunity to pitch for a piece of business. I'd come across a chap called Nick Rawdon who had a little agency, and I was freelancing for him. And I said to him one day, you know, maybe we could start this agency and go for this piece of business. But we wouldn't have been able to win it without having somebody who could come into the business and obviously bring the credibility, because I had been in the industry about 18 months. So
oh, right.
we went out and
he was very talented, I might add.
we found, fortuitously, we found Renee, or Nick did, and introduced us, and we got on well. And about a month later, we pitched for the first piece of business and won it. And on the back of that, we opened the doors officially of the Jupiter Drawing Room Johannesburg.
In 1989.
Yeah.
Our very first client was actually, we all know Hewlett-Packard, but in those days they were changing their name to High Performance Systems because of all the disinvestment in the country.
Right.
So it goes back quite some time, and we started the business in a recession as well, which was quite interesting.
Interesting. But I want to go back even further, because you've said that you landed in advertising by mistake.
Absolutely right.
So tell us about that.
Well, you know, I grew up in Bloemfontein, as you know, and when I matriculated, I went to Wits University and I did drama, because I'd studied drama ever since I was a little girl. You know, my mother wanted me to do elocution lessons and, you know, make sure that all my vowels were rounded and I spoke proper, so to speak. So it was something that I was familiar with and something I knew. So I went to Wits and I realized that being a drama student or being an actor on stage was most certainly not for me, because I wouldn't make money, and I didn't realize that I was actually quite an ambitious person. And subsequently then I decided to go into computers, and while I was waiting for this computer course to start, I got a call from a friend of mine in an advertising agency then called Louis Wilsonach Associates, or it was downtown, corner of Bree and Courts. I remember all the big agencies were downtown. And he interviewed me, and I actually got a job on the switchboard. Now, in those days, you had those little funny things that you went do like this, and I couldn't even type. I mean, I was absolutely useless, and you had this type of paper that every time you took the Tipex, it took the color of the paper out. So I was going through reams and reams of paper, but anyway, I was very ambitious. And I really made an effort to learn how to answer a telephone and how to type. And very quickly he moved me from front of office to all various different offices within in the advertising organization. And I even started their media department for them. And after I'd been with him for about 3 years, I had an excellent grounding. I was very ambitious. I loved it. I then joined the Grey Group, and that's when I really started, you know, growing advertising as a profession for myself.
And that's when you realized, I'm actually good at this.
Yes.
Maybe I should do something with
Yes, exactly.
this. So I want to talk to you about, how did you come about the name, the Jupiter Drawing Room, Graham?
I was trying to think of a name for this agency, and this is before I met Renee, because she probably wouldn't have allowed me to use it, but I wanted it to have a literary roots, because we have an agency motto, which is Rem Tene Verba Sequenta, which translates to grasp the subject and the words will follow.
Yeah.
And I think it was always important that our agency had a slightly intellectual side, in the fact that we really thought things through and we didn't just come up with superficial stuff. So I was musing over various writers, and I remembered a story. It's a fairly obscure story in a Guy de Maupassant short story. It's called Madame Tellier's Excursion. And it was about a house of ill repute in Normandy in France. And all of the locals were entertained on the ground floor of Madame Tellier's establishment. But all the dignitaries were whisked
Special people.
upstairs to the Jupiter drawing room.
Okay. What
For the elite ladies.
Oh, of course, that's for the elite. Okay,
Yes.
so we get that. Is it true that you grew up in the same neighbourhood as David Ogilvy?
It is absolutely
Interesting
true.
story. Did
He-
you know one another?
No, he's a little bit older than I am.
Somewhat.
Just a bit.
But he is my hero. I got into advertising having read his book, and I've read his book many, many times. In fact, I bought the most famous ad that he ever wrote was one for Rolls-Royce, where his headline was, "At 60 miles an hour, the loudest sound in the new Rolls-Royce comes from the ticking of the clock." And I read that ad and I went out and I bought the car. And fortunately, it was about 30 years after the ad had run, so the car was affordable. But such is the power of great advertising. But he lived literally within a mile. He grew up in Lewis Carroll's house in Surrey, in Guildford. And that was literally a mile away from where I grew up. And I only found that out recently.
Take us through the craziest moment that you've ever shared together, building this empire.
Well, there have been a number of those.
Well, one of the early memories I have, we won this piece of business, but we didn't really have an infrastructure. We didn't have really premises or anything. So we moved into number 60 Oxford Road, and we needed to decorate it, you see. So Renee found a chap, I think it was Ronnie Fellows.
Yeah, it was Ronnie Fellows in those
And
days.
he went out and he sort of sourced the wallpaper and all the things. And I said, look, I'm happy to take responsibility for the boardroom. So I went out with the checkbook and I came back and I'd spent our budget and everyone
It
said,
was 20,000 Rand and he spent
Okay, it
20,000
was a
rand.
lot of money in
yeah.
the 80s.
And this beautiful leather Chesterfield arrived.
Oh, right.
And I said to everyone, what do you think? And they said, well, that's fantastic. You managed to get that. And, you know, the other stuff. And I said, well, there isn't actually any other
It
stuff.
was actually just
It's just the leather Chesterfield. So Renee was so angry she resigned. We had the
It was my first resignation, and there were many over the
Oh,
years.
right.
and then the accountant said, I think this is hugely irresponsible. But anyway, we talked it through and we ended up keeping the Chesterfield. And
Okay.
it became the
I
icon
part of
of
the history.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
icon of our agency.
And it's still there on
because-
the landing of our, outside our boardroom.
Yeah.
And
And it stands for craftsmanship and God being in the detail, and the person that
Yeah.
made the Chesterfield didn't just mass produce it, it was something
So
that
it was
was
thought
made.
Love and
behind
the
it,
passion
Graham.
behind
There
it.
was lots of thought behind it.
Yeah, maybe post justified, but yeah, there was. And I think it is a very fitting symbol for the agency and for what we do.
But look, with any business, I'm sure there's ups and there's downs. So what would you say, what are the lessons that you'd learned through the years building this business? And what would you do differently?
Yeah. Firstly, I don't want to be arrogant and say we wouldn't do anything differently, but most probably not, because we learned from our experiences, so we haven't repeated the same
Right,
mistakes. I think that we've learned a lot. We learned a lot financially. I mean, in the early days, there used to be GST before VAT, as an example, which was 13% or whatever it was in those days, and I used to just put it in the bank. And eventually one day the bookkeeper said to me, why haven't you paid your GST? I said, oh, we're supposed to pay that on a monthly basis. So, I mean, we've had a lot of learnings over the years. But I do think that most probably in the big scheme of things is to make sure that you share the same vision and the same values in your organization. Because the moment you come from different, you have different agendas and different cultures, you'll find that your business will not be successful. So you need to stand united, you need to share and believe in your vision, and you need to live by it as leaders. I think that's most probably one of our biggest secrets of success.
Yeah, I would say it's an extraordinary time when you start an agency, because it is just so energized and you get out of bed every day and you feel you're on this major adventure.
Yeah.
So it binds you together, because our partners in the business are all very different people, and if you put them together and said these people are going into business together, you'd think you're saying that it'll never work, they're all so different. But the fact is, we got behind this thing and we thought we're going to be doing something new and something different, and we've got this strangely named agency and we're just going to try and do the best possible work. And for 15 years we never even had a signed piece of paper, between us. We didn't have contracts, shareholders agreements, we had nothing. And when I say
agreement.
that on CNBC, you'll have a lot of your top business people shaking their heads in
what
dismay.
were you thinking?
But you know, that was the reality and that was the truth. And until we
And
did
it worked for you.
and until we did our empowerment deal, that was when we had to sort of grow up and start doing all the formal
We
paperwork.
did have articles of association in
Yeah,
place.
we had
anyway.
to. But the point I'm making, I think, is that when you start a company and when the company is going through its infancy, you really find people work together and they gel. And as you get bigger and bigger, it's sometimes hard to keep that same level of energy and enthusiasm
And
passion.
culture.
Well, I
And
want to talk
culture.
to you about culture because I've read that it's more of a family culture with the Jupiter Drawing Room. And if you go to your agency, it's a house. You know, so you get that feeling of togetherness and family. Talk us through if that is the case.
I think, you know, in the early days, Graham and I as individuals are both very caring people. And I think we're both very genuine people. So you tend to attract like. So whenever we interviewed people, we attracted people who shared our values.
Right.
And, you know, we have someone, her name's Samantha, who's been with us for 21 years.
Wow.
We have a lot of people who've been with us for longer than 15 years. So there's been a tremendous amount of loyalty and a lot of people who believed in what we wanted to create. Has the culture changed since we have sold? Yes, it has, but there's nothing wrong. I don't ever want Jupiter to be the agency it was when it was an infant or a teenager.
You have to evolve.
It's matured.
Of course.
And we'd like to believe that it's retained the same good values of honesty, integrity, transparency, and we still retain the belief that we're there to build brands and to produce work that makes a huge difference to our clients.
And on that note, talking about brands and clients, who would you say is your long-standing client? Who's been with you for the
we know
longest
that.
period of time?
Well, I must say, our client in Edcon and Steve Ross has been a remarkable, you know, they've been through such an evolution in their own business and they've had highs and they've had their lows and they really are turning that business round since they sold it into private equity and everything, and they're doing a great job. And they have been loyal to us through thick and thin, and we'd like to believe that we have made a contribution to their business and we'll continue to do so.
Almost like a marriage, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is.
Most memorable campaign that you can think of throughout the 21 years.
I have a favourite ad, because obviously we've done a few over the years, but for me, if someone said choose one piece of work that for you really represents the Jupiter Drawing Room, it would be a print ad that we did, and it was for Nike to advertise their sponsorship of Comrades. And the client said, you know, just need a little ad say we're sponsoring Comrades, and we actually ended up writing 7,500 words of copy. So we took this full page broadsheet, and at the top left hand corner it said Durban, and at the bottom right corner it said Peter Maritzburg, and then we described, fairly small type, what it's like to actually run the Comrades for the first time competitor. And it was really a lot of work and energy went into the writing, even though most people wouldn't read it. If you chose the paragraph to read, you'll find that it was beautifully written. And at the end it just said, Peter Maritzburg, Durban, all this copy, and at the end it just said, challenging to read, try running it. Nike.
It
swoosh.
sounds like an award-winning campaign.
It was.
Yeah, I got a couple of golds at Cannes. It was a defining ad for our agency. But for me, going back to craftsmanship and detail and the effort and energy that went into producing it, it's a lovely example, I think, of how we approach work. It's not just about knocking out stuff. It's about
And then
taking
awards,
time.
how important are awards at the end of the day for you, for the client?
Reputation-wise, I think that they definitely influence your reputation because you find that the media constantly report on who's the best performing agency. But provided the awards, creativity is hugely important. It's our end product. But provided it actually has an objective and it delivers relevant, meaningful communication that works, it has to be important because we want to be different. That's how we differentiate ourselves and our clients, through creativity.